What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of you for Nier Automata. This is episode 24, also the last episode, and with me, as always, I have Bluespid.
Yeah, so of course we speculated that this was going to adapt, well, somewhat adapt ending, well, pretty much the last three endings to be honest, and it pretty much played out exactly how I thought it would. I mean, it was mostly just a combination between both endings, C and D altogether, and of course it leads into ending E, but it plays out a little bit differently than how the game did. Um, but of course, like the episode does start off with a battle between A2 and 9S. Um, it pretty much ends with A2 like barely defeating 9S by cutting off the 2B arm that he attached. But the only difference is that 9S retaliates by hacking A2, and he tries to break her will by using her memories and her guild against her.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the way they adapted the fight. Uh, I kind of figured that that scene from the opening was going to be part of the fight in this episode, and it was. But I thought it was pretty well animated. It looked pretty good. Uh, but I also wasn't really sure what was going to happen after this fight because, um, obviously this is where it diverges into multiple different endings. I kind of figured what would happen was that Taro would implement elements from all the different endings into this ending in the anime, and that's kind of what happens. Um, it did remind me in a weird way of like Evangelion, where they 9S is sort of digging into A2's memories and trying to sort of like use that against her in a way, and she kind of has to sort of overcome it. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of like that human instrumentality from the and the original Evangelion sort of.
Yeah, I think that there was some inner monologue between both 2B and 9. No, not 2B. A2 and 9S when they were battling each
Mm.
other, with A2 fighting, to preserve the future, while 9S pretty much without 2B being alive, he lost all his will to even even move on, and just pretty much wants to destroy everything at this point.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I did like like how they implemented the arc. I guess you'd say the arc ending from the game where Adam shows up, and in the game at least it was Adam asks or not to be I mean 9S if he wants to join him and the other machines with them being shot into space and their consciousness just kind of floating around on this thing, on this arc, which originally it was intended to be a weapon to destroy uh, the server on the moon, but then the Red Twins basically, I guess, repurposed it to become an arc to just basically be like this floating arc of this collective consciousness of all the machines and the androids just kind of floating around in space. And that I like how they use that in the anime, where they show Adam, Eve, and the other dead machines talking to A2, basically like asking if she wants to join them on the arc. And that's pretty much what A2 ends up doing is joining the rest of them on the arc, and it's shot up into space, and then you just see the tower, or like the giant cannon, like collapsing with 9S's body at least is salvaged by the pods before he can be caught up in the collapse.
Yeah, and so eventually this leads into both the remaining pods carrying 9S to safety, and then all of a sudden, what was it? The other pods, like hidden all around the city, initiate the final phase to destroy all evidence of Yorha and its
It,
existence.
yeah, so I think this is pretty different from the game, because in the game this doesn't really happen. It's the pods just carrying 9S and 2B's bodies, and they pretty much speculate, wonder if the cycle will continue, because of course it kind of plays out the same, where 2B's pod basically says he can't accept this resolution, and that he doesn't want the data from, or the I guess all the memories from 9S and 2B to be deleted, and they decide to, I guess, leave their memories alone, but they wonder if the cycle will continue of the war between the machines and the androids. So it's kind of left up to interpretation in a way, if the cycle will continue, and it does kind of end the same way for the most part in the anime, but it feels a little bit, in my opinion, it felt a little bit more conclusive. I liked this additional content that Taro added, I guess, with all the other pods, going after like 2B's pod and the other pod. I think, yeah, just going after the other two pods and them like trying to fight them off. That was interesting. And then of course we have like the final scene after that, where you basically see the aftermath of this giant fight between all these two pods and all the other ones. And then you see 2B and 9S waking up, which I was wondering if they were going to do that, or if they were just going to end it off with the two of them just kind of lying there unconscious, and you kind of have to fill in the gaps as to what might have happened after that. I like that it had 2B waking up, both 2B and 9S waking up together. Like I feel like that was, in a way, it felt a little bit more conclusive in that way. And then of course you did see A2's body, I think, also in the game, and you see her body here lying next to a lunar tier. But you also see a cord show up, which was another kind of interesting Easter egg, I guess, for Drakengard fans. She was referenced by one of the traders in the Resistance camp earlier in the game, not in the game, but in the anime, and that kind of made sense because a cord is basically like a merchant. If in Drakengard, she just sells you various things, but she's also like a interdimensional, like she can travel between dimensions, and she's also kind of an android herself. So the problem they have with this, though, is that a lot of people who aren't familiar with Drakengard aren't really going to know who Accord is and why she's even important. So it just felt more so like Taro sort of throwing in an Easter egg for Drakengard fans to have her show up at the very last scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's going to be confusing from mostly the newcomers who are just going to be going in wondering who this person
Yeah,
is. And
it's the same criticism I had with him throwing in the huge plot twist for the original Nier, when he was going into Devil and Popola's backstory in the anime. He didn't really need to do that, but he just decided to do, and I feel like he did that just to again, just as just sort of a fan service in a way for people who played the original Nier. But of course, the problem with that is the people who haven't are going to be spoiled for the original, the original Nier.
yeah, I think the problem with that Devil and Popola thing is like they needed to throw in their backstories somehow without like they were not
Yeah,
just gonna like throw them in there and then just and then just kill them off without explaining who these two characters were. I mean, most people were who haven't
right.
seen or watched or played the games, don't know who Devil and Popola are, and I guess this is a way. I mean, they they tried to do like a more condensed general explanation for Devil and Popola's backstory, but it's like
It could have been done the way it was done in the game, where in the game they actually didn't. I don't think they spoiled that plot point from the original Nier. So they could have done it the same way, but of course Taro decided to add all that stuff in.
yeah, and of course that the thing with the chord. I mean, I don't think it really needed. I don't think it really needed to be there. To be honest, I mean,
Yeah, it
I
was
mean,
nice to be. I'm not really like against it. I like that it's there, but I just I'm just saying, for people who don't know who she is and haven't played like Drakengard and haven't played Near Replicant, they're not really gonna get some of these references.
yeah, I mean, they did show those like little a flashback or tidbit moments showing some of the origin
Kaine.
what was it Kaine and some of the near reincarnation characters. Um,
Replicant, not
yeah,
reincarnation.
no,
Reincarnation is its
replicant.
own
Yeah,
thing.
replicant. Yeah. So uh, yeah, but overall, I did like this. I did like how the episode concluded. It pretty much ended the way I thought it would, with a few surprises and a couple changes here and there. Um, and of course, the series does end with A2 and 9S waking up next to each other, and of course, the episode title changes from the end of Yorha to Alternative Eden. So most
Mhm.
people would speculate that both A2 and 9S are essentially the new Adam and Eve of the planet, seeing as all the machine network's pretty much gone since A2 launched them into space, and a- and of course the entire android resistance group was pretty much all but destroyed at this point, and pretty much non-existent as
Yeah.
well. So it's just pretty much the only remaining, I guess, sentient beings on Earth at this point is A2 and 9S. Plus, their pods are both are both like deactivated at this point as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think it was. I actually like this ending a little bit better than the game because, especially as someone who's played the game, it felt a little bit more conclusive as opposed to the game where you don't really get to see them waking up together and you just kind of have to assume that they did and that they just I mean you could assume the same thing in the game's ending too, that they are supposed to be the new, like, I guess, Adam and Eve of that world, because obviously humanity is extinct, the rest of the machines are gone, the other androids are gone, so it's pretty much just them left. um, but yeah, I thought that the way the anime handled things was pretty decent. Obviously, they couldn't adapt the other endings of the game, but Taro did include elements of those endings, and he expanded it on the last ending of the game as well. So I think it's really kind of the best of both worlds in a way, where you do get elements from the other endings, but at the same time you also have the last ending of the game as well, but with some added details, as well as sort of some, like I said, some Easter eggs thrown in for Dragon Guard fans with the cord showing up. But I thought it was, yeah, the anime overall was great. I honestly thought it was actually a pretty good adaptation of the game, while at the same time sort of doing its own thing in certain regards, without really like changing too much from the main plot of the game. I think they handled it in a pretty good way without, going too far in its own, in a different direction from the game's plot.
Yeah, there are some like little plot points that are just like left like unchecked. Like one with Emil, for example. I mean, we did see his, you know,
Yeah,
he's still wandering around somewhere, but we never really get to see him again. Ever since the start
it,
of
it
this.
did feel like Emil kind of got shafted in the anime. Like, there was more to, going on with Emil in the game. Uh, and I guess that's something that maybe had to be cut from the anime, unfortunately. Like, he just showed up very briefly in a few scenes, and that's pretty much it. So
Well,
it does kind of suck that he wasn't.
yeah, it's just
Yeah,
it's confusing about Emil because in the first core, like his head like was like inside that tree in Pascal's village, but
yeah,
then
and that never shows up again.
yeah, and then of course like he shows up again. Well, this time on in a speaking role this time, but only in that like that one tiny scene in what was it, the first episode of the second core, in which uh 2B and 9S end up running into him, but he just rolls off when they threaten to destroy him. But then like I said, he never shows up again after this. Um so yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know if it was really even necessary to really include Emil in that way, nor did I find it like necessary to even add a chord by the end of the episode. I mean, well, we can understand why she appeared. Like it looked like she did some repairs to A2 before disappearing, but that's about it.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I don't really have too much else to say about the series as a whole. Obviously, like, I'd honestly give it I don't know about a nine. I'd probably give it either an eight or a nine. I'm not too sure. Um, I mean, maybe an eight because yeah, there were some things that I felt like could have done a little bit better, but for the most part, I think it did everything it was supposed to do as trying to adapt the game, and I mean even added some things which I think was good for the most part. Unfortunately, just the only real complaints is I had was that they had it feels like I guess they had to cut a lot of stuff from Emil. Uh, but other than that, I think it was everything else was pretty great. I didn't really have too many complaints about it.
Yeah. I thought this anime does several things better than the game. Especially with with A2's backstory. I mean, technically her
Yeah.
backstory was included in some of the I guess in the supplemental material like the manga and the other stuff that you know it- that was the of course the Pearl Harbor descent. But I'm glad that they included it in this anime, and it actually did make her development even better in this show than it did in the game because much of that all that
Hmm.
information was in like those what was it in those text terminal boxes you have to look and read into. But but it's made a lot better when you really get to see what actually happened. Um, and of course, I was, there were certain things that did take me by surprise, uh, like how they like with them like killing off the entire resistance group, uh, completely took me by surprise because in the game you can choose to. Well, they actually, the resistance group actually ends up surviving by the end of the game, but I'm surprised that they decided to go the route to just completely kill everybody.
Yeah, that was another change that did kind of surprise me. I mean, they obviously cut the factory segment to include that, but I don't really think we really. I mean, things do play out in a similar way to how they would if they, in the factory part that was cut from the anime. It's just that they changed it to what happened in the resistance camp in the anime.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, I so I do wonder like where do you what else do you think that I mean, do you think that maybe someday we might eventually get maybe an adaptation of the original Nier? Since there's so many references to that in the Nier Automata anime. I mean, maybe it's I mean I do wonder about that, but at the same time, the original Nier isn't as popular or as well known as Nier Automata, so I do kind of wonder about that. But
They,
I also kind of wonder if that's not a possibility with all these references that were thrown in with the Nier Automata anime.
I I I think there may be a good chance that Yoko Taro uh might go might go to distance to make an adaptation for near replicant because I think that it would
Yeah.
clear the air on certain things for near automata. Um and it I don't know. It might include like maybe some hints and some kind of continuation um to this story as well because the story of Automata, the way it ends, it's still left up in the air of what happens to the entire world. I mean, humanity's extinct. 2B and 9S are essentially the two only like sentient beings left on the planet, and whether and it's ambiguous of whether or not the planet will ever repopulate again or humanity will ever be reborn in some way.
I honestly, I'm kind of the opinion I like where both the game and also where the anime ends off in terms of there being any kind of continuation. I think it ends in a pretty good place. I like that there's some amount of ambiguity to it. I honestly, I'm of the opinion that we don't really need to have a continuation or have another Nier. I'd honestly rather Taro maybe do something new. But I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to another Nier game. I just don't really know where he can go from where he, left off at the end of Nier Automata.
Yeah, I mean, Automata is like the last game chronologically in the series, and he hasn't really
Yeah.
made any sort of sequel. I mean, he's made like other games like Replicant and reincarnation, but those games mostly take place in in timelines preceding this.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I mean that. Yeah, with the replicant, yeah, it does. I mean, well, it takes place 1,000 years prior to Nier Automata.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah, but yeah. Again, I don't really have too much else to say about the series. I don't know if you have anything else to say about it.
Yeah, this was like one of the best anime adaptations for for a video game. I mean, we've seen other ones, but they were a mixed bag. It's at several points, but I think this is like one of the best ones that we've seen so far. Especially that
Yeah.
Taro has went, um, it took several risks that did end up paying off in the end.
Yeah, I think obviously it benefits from having Taro being one of the, I guess one of the writers or supervisors from in the anime, and him having such a prominent role and probably in the development of the adaptation.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
hopefully we'll get to see what if Taro will have any interest in um maybe making like a follow up sequel, or he might end up doing an anime adaptation for um for Near Replicant.
yeah, that's honestly what I would hope to see at some point. Unfortunately, I feel like it's somewhat unlikely considering that Replicant just isn't as well known as Automata. Automata makes a lot more sense because it is very popular. But the other problem too is that because Taro had already revealed that massive spoiler in Automata, uh, I feel like it honestly would unfortunately kind of hurt a potential Replicant adaptation. But I still think obviously it could be done. I just think, like I said, it's somewhat unlikely considering it's not as well known as Automata.
I think the
But
best.
I
I
guess
think
we'll
the
see about that.
I think the best it can do if Taro were to move forward with like a replicant adaptation is it would create more interest into that story, just as it did
Mhm.
for Near Automata. I mean, we'll have to see where Taro goes from here. But yeah, I'd say like the Automata adaptation was definitely a success, despite some some hiccups with the production with the first core.
Yeah, that's another thing is that fortunately they didn't really have those production issues on the second core, um, and that's what I was kind of concerned about. But yeah, fortunately that didn't happen again. So and was able to conclude in a decent way. Um, so yeah, I mean that's it's pretty much the best we could have hoped for in that regard. But yeah, guys. So that all being said, until next time, we will see you all later.